All right, it's Tuesday evening edition of Weather for Weather Geeks. Hope you had a great day, everyone. It was a cold day. It's going to be a cold night tonight, but the pattern is about to change, and it's one for the milder as we go into midweek and beyond. This will be the last time we have a high in the mid-20s for a while. 26 was the high temperature this afternoon, middle teens for lows after midnight, but before midnight last night, we actually got down to 14 at the airport. It was one for the record books back in 1985. Yesterday began that cold snap, and then on the 21st, it really peaked in the morning hours with an early morning low of 20 below zero. Not the coldest temperature on record here. That number is 22 below back on January 19th, 1994. But this is second place, second coldest temperature on record on today's date back in 1985. The record high today, just a few years ago, it was 60 degrees back in 2017. All right, 24 yesterday. I didn't put today on the calendar just yet, but again, we were in the mid-20s today, so only the third cooler than average high temperature so far in January. 9.5 degrees above average when we factor in both the highs and the lows for January so far, putting it, if January ended today, it would be the sixth warmest January on record. Meteorological winter is a little more than 6 weeks, close to 7 weeks old now, and meteorological winter also through today's date is the sixth warmest on record. And we're going to add to some of these numbers, I think, over the next week to 10 days. We'll talk about the longer range momentarily. Pretty cloudy day today, a little bit cloudier than I bargained for, and I really should have listened to my gut. My gut was saying, hey, it's mid-January, there's still Arctic air around, the Great Lakes are still wide open. It's probably going to be another pretty cloudy day, and that came to fruition. I didn't quite pull the trigger on enough clouds in my official forecast on TV and on air last night and online as well, but we even had some flurries into this morning. When there's Arctic air in January, and especially if there's no ice on the lakes, just forecast clouds. That's the general rule, and that's one of those things that experience teaches you, but every now and then you just kind of let one slip. So yeah, it was a little bit cloudier than I bargained for today, but the clouds are clearing out this evening, and this will allow temperatures to cool very, very nicely. Speaking of cool weather, down in Florida tonight, there are wind chill advisories out for just about the entire state with the exception of the Panhandle, and these wind chill advisories included in the language out of the National Weather Service in Miami, an alert about possible falling iguanas, which apparently is a thing that happens in South Florida when it gets really cold outside. Cold-blooded animals tend to become, the cold makes it so that it's hard for them to move, and they tend to lose their balance and fall off trees. And so National Weather Service in Miami put out a statement this afternoon in some social media posts warning about that, and of course that's gotten a lot of play on social media. That is some fantastic social media content. Here at 7 o'clock this evening, it's already down in the 50s down at Miami International Airport, Orlando. Anybody at Disney World this week is shivering by Orlando standards. It's in the mid-40s. Cold stuff for Florida. All right, we're going to see some sunshine, an appreciable amount of sunshine coming our way for our Wednesday as high pressure pays us a visit. I think Thursday, you see a lot of white here. I think this is a veil of high clouds. I think may be able to still make out some sun behind those clouds. Sometimes I call this a milky sky. And be another pretty mild day on Thursday as we get into the 40s. Then the clouds will lower and thicken on Thursday, and while I don't think it's raining in the morning, by late afternoon some of these showers are pushing in, and this will set the stage for a little bit of an unsettled period as we head into the upcoming weekend. Very little, if any, snow coming our way over the next week. Here's a look at the current model spread. Not really buying what the GFS Ensemble is selling here, but the GFS and the Euro are both under an inch. I think that's reasonable. I don't think any sort of substantial accumulation is coming our way anytime real soon. So if you're a snow lover, hopefully you liked what we had over this past weekend. All right, real quick word about the longer range. I'm going to show you something a little bit different tonight. This is the hemispheric view, and we're looking at the polar vortex here. Actually, this is way up at the top of the atmosphere, almost into outer space, 10 millibars. So, you know, there's barely any air up here, but this is what we look at when we're trying to look at the polar vortex and how that can influence weather patterns across the northern hemisphere. Right now, it's kind of an elongated polar vortex across the northern hemisphere, and that's allowing some colder air to come down into North America. But as I roll this forward, you're going to notice that the shape of this vortex really changes. First of all, it retreats northward, and then it becomes really strong and really tight. And it also moves to the other side of the pole. So the center of the polar vortex, as we go into late January, we're talking next week, is more over into Siberia and on the other side of the Arctic Circle. And there's no polar vortex anywhere to be found across the northern hemisphere, and that's going to keep the cold well away from here next week. And probably this pattern continues right into the first at least handful of days of February. It does not look very cold across North America into early February. This animation takes us all the way through the 6th. As long as the polar vortex is over here and we have no kind of blocking patterns in a favorable spot, we're going to have a hard time getting cold. And by cold, I mean midwinter cold. You know, of course, it's not going to be 80 degrees, but we're just going to have a hard time squeezing out much typical midwinter cold in this kind of a pattern. Does that mean it can't snow? No. If the stars line up, you can get some snow in a pattern like that. After all, it's the dead of winter. But sustained cold several days in a row with the kind of cold that we've had like over the last couple of days, just it's not going to happen at the end of January and into early February. We're starting to really, you know, the fate may be sealed on the winter of 2019-2020 as a forecast bust for a lot of meteorologists who went out with a cold forecast. My forecast was not as cold as some, but it's still going to end up being too cold of a forecast. We had a pretty warm December. Of course, it's been a warm January. And while I do think some cold can get into the pattern in mid to late February, early February, forget about it. And, you know, by then we're starting to count the days until meteorological spring, which is only about 5.5 weeks away. Can't wait. All right, thanks for watching tonight's Weather for Weather Geeks. Thanks for hanging with me, and I'll see you back here on Wednesday.